The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Lighting Controls Podcast. We have a fantastic episode for you today with no guest. It's just Webster and I. You guys get just us. And so this ought to be interesting. But before we jump into the conversation, let me take a minute to remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Academy.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes and a whole lot more. But also a huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode. We cannot do these episodes without their support. MaxLight and their CMax lighting controls platform. I highly recommend you check this out. It is a really cool solution for a lot of different commercial projects that may have challenges with lighting controls. And so what you can do is you can basically order your fixtures, no controls planned whatsoever, get them installed. And then because they have that patented USB-C on their controls ready fixtures, you just plug whatever controls device you want into the fixture and it's ready to go, ready to be programmed. You can just walk around either with a smartphone. They sometimes even just have remote control devices that just allow you to go without smartphone. You just have a small programming device, can do a lot of different features. They go from basic to networked, and they've partnered with a couple of groups. Excellent product. Really highly recommend you go to maxlite.com/CMAX to learn more. But let's get into the conversation. So today we have Ron and me to talk to you. And for fun, we figured we would talk about the mistakes we've made in our time in the industry. We've spent a huge amount of time, Ron, talking to people about the mistakes either they've made or that other people have made, but we really haven't had a humbling conversation about our own chagrins within the industry. And so I thought it might be fun to just kind of air out the dirty laundry that way and share, because I mean, that's the reality of the situation is nobody's perfect. There's nobody who's going to have a flawless career without any mistakes done. And if we don't talk about these, then people don't get to learn from them. And so that's really where we get to help people understand, because I'm not flawless. I've made tons of mistakes through my life.
Yep. No, I think we all have, right? And it's the best learning experience though, right? Like, unfortunately, right, sometimes you do have to make mistakes in order to learn. Like you said, no one's perfect. And if you don't learn from your mistakes and your failures, you're never going to elevate yourself to that next level and want to be better at what you do. So you have to go through those experiences. And as hard as we may try, we all do.
Right. No, and so like the first one that I'd like to share is actually from my beginning days in the architectural side after I had transitioned from theater. I was working for an engineering firm, and I had reviewed a lighting fixture submittal package, and I figured, you know what? I think this is fine. I'm just going to send my comments back without getting a second reviewer involved. And that actually turned into a massive accident, because basically there was a fixture in there that was a bespoke fixture that had these unique lighting elements in them. And the contractor didn't pick up, or the distributor didn't pick up, that it was a specific fixture type that had this unique element to it. And they had just put the generic stock fixture as a linear instead of a linear with a drop down lens. And so I had reviewed the cut sheet and I was like, yeah, that looks like the right fixture. And I just gone through it really quickly and sent it back. And then later on, as the contractors were installing the fixtures, I get a phone call from the architect being like, hey, where are the drop down lenses for these fixtures? And I was like, what? And I looked at the submittal and I was like, oh crap. And so I went to my supervisor, and I was like, and she was like, oh no, this is a really expensive mistake. And the good thing is the contractor was really kind. They said, you know what? It's also on us that this got screwed up because we should have done our due diligence too. So let's split the cost here. Let's see if the manufacturer is willing to discount it, and they were. So at the end of the day, it was not as big of an expensive accident as it could have been. But I learned, always have a second reviewer, no matter how certain you are that your submittals are reviewed perfectly. Always get a second opinion, because you never know if there's going to be that one little thing where it's like, yeah, that could cascade into a huge ordeal.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that I run into all the time too, right? You're
Right.
especially like it can be as simple as quoting. Forget some of the field work sometimes, right? You're rushing through something, and it's always the small jobs that get you. Always,
Yes.
right? You're
Yes.
rushing through. You're like, I can bang this out. I can get this out the door, and inherently, you forgot something. You forgot that
Right.
extra accessory, that lens, that something, right? There's always, but because it's such a small job, that's always the ones that get you. It's like, cool. So we just did that job for free. That's okay. That's awesome. But that's what, and sometimes I think it's gotten really tough. And I think we as an industry need to, well, not just as an industry, I think the Northeast in specific is worse about this
Yeah,
than other parts of the country.
for
We're
sure.
always ramped up at 11 and no one knows
Yeah.
to slow down. Right. And I think that's a big part of the problem is in other parts of the country, things don't move as quickly as they do here. And
Mhm.
we
Yeah.
are our own worst enemies. And you need to take that minute to kind of slow down and double check your work, have somebody else review it. It is amazing what you will learn from your own work
Right.
when you have a second set of
Right.
eyes on it, because you can look at it till you're blue in the face and think it's perfect, and then someone
Yep.
else goes, but what about, and what about, you go, yeah, okay, all right, yep, I see it, yep. So it is 100% worth that extra time and that extra review to have
Right.
someone go through your work and make sure it's right, because it's not fun
And
when you
not
make
just
those
for
mistakes.
submittals, but for
No.
anything. I mean, to have a second
Yes.
reviewer in general is always, I mean, I'm a freelancer, which makes it challenging to have
Yep.
a second reviewer at times, but that's where you come in sometimes. I'm like, Ron, hey, can you take a look at this for me and make sure I'm not just shoving my foot in my mouth? Um,
Yep.
so like finding those people that you can go to and say, hey, I just need a second pair of eyes on this. I need to make sure that I'm not really screwing myself over by saying this, especially when it's a custom thing. When it's a,
Yeah.
cookie cutter, it could sometimes be a little bit easier to get away, but I still, even with the small, like you said, the small jobs are the ones that get you,
Yep.
because either it's just like, yeah, I've done this before, and you throw it on, and then later on it's like, oh no, that's right, there was this unique thing that gets in the way. And I'm curious if
Yep.
you've had that happen to you.
Well, I mean, we've had everything happen. It is, right? Like a lot of times, and because we do a lot of like retrofits and we work with a lot of customers, we oftentimes find customers who are like, hey, I came across this thing and I was able to buy this equipment, used online. Can we reuse it? And depending on the age of the gear and what it is, like we always want to try to help them. If
Hmm.
they have something that's adequate and will work, great. So we had this one specific job where someone had purchased a dimmer rack from another facility and it was only like 2 years old. Great. Like that's the same rack I was going to use. Like aside from trying the electrician trying to match up conduit holes and and fill in whatever, fine, no big deal. So we took a quick look at the rack. We did an inventory of the dimmer rack itself. Everything's great. Modules, everything cool. 0 to 10 option cards in the bottom. We're good to go. Everything's happy. Contractors got everything in. We're starting to like test everything and getting ready to start programming. We're going through and all of a sudden we're like, why aren't the lights dimming? Like why is all the 0 to 10 backwards? Like did the electrician have an issue? Like what is going on here with all the wiring? And we're like, I don't understand. So we start going through it and we're going through it more and we're looking at all the wiring. We're like, nope, everything's fine. We start rip open the rack. We lift every 0 to 10 header and we start going through and we're like, all right, let's just touch them together and let's just see what happens, right? Nothing's dimming. And then, so we touch them together and they're dimming. I'm like, okay. All right, the
Okay.
wiring's
All
good.
right.
The electrician's
Yeah.
fine. Like everything's all right, great. Let's put them back. Okay, double check the dimmer rack settings. Are we set for 0 to 10? Yep, that's all set. Like, okay, why isn't this dimming? We've chased our tails for a good 3 or 4 hours before we took the 2 seconds to read the part number on the card in the bottom of the dimmer rack to find out that it was a dolly card and not a
Oh
0 to 10
no.
card. So,
Oh,
like, it was like, we just, so that was the type of thing, not a huge ordeal. We ended up
right.
buying the 0 to 10 card for the customer because we were like, look, I know you bought it used, but we told you it was good to go and you didn't need anything. And the card's inexpensive, no big deal. But we lost, 2 guys, a half day. We lost a full day's worth of work essentially because we didn't take the time to actually go through and verify the part numbers of everything that was in this equipment that we didn't sell them, right? That
Right.
because they had purchased it third party. So it's that kind of stuff though that, and especially depending on the territory you cover, like lucky for
Mhm.
us, that job was 30 minutes away, but we've had
Sure.
jobs 4, 5, 6 hours away where there's issues like this. And you're not getting that part overnight. So now
Right.
you've got to eat the travel time to go back to that job. Like the time on site is one thing, but when you lose 6 hours each way in travel time and an extra night of hotel, it adds up really
Yeah.
fast if you're not taking that time to just go through stuff. So it's,
No, it reminds me of something that you learn in the theater world, which is bring every tool you can think of if you're going to a far away place.
yeah,
So,
yep,
like, we do in theater, there's catwalks, which are these platforms that you can walk along that are above typically the audience, but they can be over the stage as well. And sometimes getting to the catwalks can be an ordeal. And
yep,
so, if you're going up to the catwalks in that case, you want to bring every tool you can think of because it is going to be such a pain to then have to go all the way back to the shop to grab the one tool you forgot and go
yep,
all the way back up to the catwalk. And I mean, sometimes they have like buckets that they'll drop down via rope, but it's just sort of that mentality of like, okay, how far away is this thing?
yeah,
And I think that that's a really good point to bring up. But I think the other thing there is this sort of, you know, making sure that you know what is there, and that's why some integrators refuse to work on projects that they didn't provide the gear on because they can't
yep,
confirm what
yep.
is there. But, I think, these sorts of challenges are really important to keep in mind, and sometimes you can only learn this lesson this way. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and well, so and another one that we've picked up recently that's been a big issue is, look, again, everyone's trying to work really fast. We've had contractors say, "Yes, we're ready for startup. Everything is all set."
Mhm.
And we send a technician 4 hours north to get there and find out the site's not actually ready, right? So now what do?
Mm,
You're already there. You might as well try and assist them as best you can. Do what you've lost the day, right? There's no
right.
reason to just turn around, get back in the car and come back. But now you've got to get into this pissing match sometimes with who's paying for the second day. Our
Right.
side is you said you were ready and you weren't. Their side is, well, no, we were ready, but we didn't know. It's just it's never a fun thing to get into. But
Right.
we've recently got into, okay, you're ready, great. We're 4 hours away. We're going to set up a Zoom call so that you can actually show us that everything we want, on your
Mm,
phone. Let's walk the site, and we want you to show us these very specific things so that we can make
right.
sure you're actually ready for us before we come out there.
Right.
And it's not perfect, right? It can't fix everything, but it fixes hey, that entire panel's not even wired yet. So
Right.
you're not ready because you've got a
Yeah.
day just getting that done, right? So it's fixed a lot of that issue, but that's the type of stuff that,
Mhm.
like, same thing, until you've been through it a couple of times, you don't think to, ask these questions or do these
Right.
follow-ups, and especially a smaller firm or someone who's just getting started, like, that can especially if you're an independent contractor, that's never
Yeah.
a fun time. You know what I mean? That's
Right.
not a fun argument to have with anybody of that someone's going to pay for an extra day now because of this. So stuff like
Yeah.
that is so helpful.
Definitely. And the other thing, part of that is because if you've never gone through the pain of that, you might not know what to look for. So like,
Yep.
okay, the panel's not fully wired up. You know that that's a day of work. Somebody who's unfamiliar with it might be like, "Oh, it's like an hour of work, right?" It's like, no, that's
Yeah.
not. So, having this experience, I mean, experience is really one of the most valuable things to me anyways is and sometimes it's experienced via hearing somebody else telling a story. It's like, yeah,
Yep.
here's what happened when we did that. You don't want to do that.
Yep. Yep. And we've had contractors on this show preach site walks prior to going to installation. This is
Yep.
not lighting related, but it is rigging related, right? So our firm does a lot of theatrical rigging. This is years
Hmm.
ago. And I was working on a front of house lighting position. So over the seats in front of the stage, over the audience. And we were doing a line shaft hoist. And I was working off the plans, working off the drawings. I never confirmed anything in space for that hoist. I did over the
Oops.
stage because I knew that the
Yeah.
stage was level, new steel. The front of house was angled steel for the roof, which is
Oh
part of the reason we were
no.
doing the line shaft. I never confirmed any of that in space, and we get everything there, and we're going to install it, and we get to the midpoint, and there's this diagonal brace in the way, and nothing. I can't. Their clouds are where the clouds are going. I have a
Right.
1 foot hole I have to fit through. I can't move this hoist one way or the other. And it was, I was a young project manager back then. I mean, we're going back a good like
Yeah.
16 years, right? This was a
No,
while ago. And man, I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I was like, how do I fix this? I'm like, I
yeah.
gotta call my boss and tell them that I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I'm like trying to figure it out myself. And I'm like, just like trying to see what I can do. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, all right, well, this diagonal's bolted. So I could probably unbolt it, but it's obviously
Oh no.
structural. So I can't just take it. I can't just remove it.
Right.
So I go get the GC and I'm like, look, here's where we're at. This thing has to go here. We need to move this. How do we do this? So he was really cool about it. The GC worked
Mhm.
with me on it. We figured it out. Luckily, it wasn't a huge cost, but we had to bring, the steel guys back out, welders. They had to like redo this whole thing and make a custom brace because they couldn't use those bolt holes anymore.
Yeah.
But we got it and we figured it out. But that was probably one of the most terrifying moments that I had like early
Totally.
on, because I was like, I don't know how to fix it. Like this thing is in
Yep.
the way. If I had double checked this, I could have dropped the whole thing down and landed between
Mhm.
the diagonal instead of, so I mean,
Yeah.
that could have cost a lot of money, and it could have been a real big deal. And we got lucky, and it was early on in the project. So there were no seats
Mhm.
in yet. The clouds weren't in. So we had full access to everything. But if we were coming in after everybody else and we had run into that problem, it would have been
Oh
real,
yeah.
real bad.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. Well, and I think that that's the one of the cautionary things for people who may not be experienced enough in any construction work is do not try to hide your mistakes. It's
yeah.
only going to make things worse. I mean, most groups, when you come clean and you say, "I am sorry, I really made a
Yep.
mistake here," they'll be sympathetic because they've been there too, and they'll just be like, "Okay, how can we address this?" And sometimes, yeah, it's going to be an added expense to the project, and that's
Yep.
unavoidable. But, being upfront about it is the best method because, you know, there's that voice in the back of your head that's like, well, if you don't say anything, are they going to notice? And it's like, that is
Yeah.
such a risk.
It,
So,
well, and like you said, coming clean and just dealing with it is the best option. Because look, at the end of the day, the GC, are they going to be upset? Are they going to give you a hard time? Of course they are. But at the
Yeah, of
same time,
course.
they're going to work with you because they have to finish the project. And you're now causing this whole mess potentially for
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
else until this is rectified, right? So
Right.
if you just deal with it right away, you have the best chance of getting it addressed quickly and having people,
Hmm.
work with you to find a solution versus trying to hide it. And we do
Yeah.
unfortunately see that a lot. And the time that I've seen this the worst, and I'm sure you've encountered this, wire type, right?
Yes.
Manufacturers are
Yes.
very, very specific about the wire types that they allow for their
Hmm.
digital communication, right? Different manufacturers use different wire. It's very specific. Every manufacturer has a cheat sheet, has a guide of what wires are
Yes.
approved and not approved. And we've found, unfortunately, and it's always when you're turning on a job and it's not too
Yeah.
late, but it's too late, right? Is you
Right.
start getting
Right.
into it and you're like, why can I see this half the network and not the whole network? Or why can I see it and then it drops off 10 minutes later? Like, why does this keep
Right.
happening? And then you start digging in and you start, it as a technician, everything's working, half of it's working. Everything okay, let me cut it in half. Is it this
Yeah.
half? Is it this half? You start cutting things in half, right? You start working your way through that troubleshooting process. And all of a sudden up in the ceiling, and I'm like, this is not the same wire that's
Right.
over there at the panel. And I start looking at it. I'm like, I'll pull out the phone. I'm looking. I'm like, this is not improved wire type. Oh, okay. Where else is
Yeah.
this wire? And you start digging in, and then
Right.
that's when you realize. And then it's always, oh well, we ran out of that one, and we ran this, and we thought it'd be fine. It's like, well, but it's not, and now it needs to be
Yeah.
rerun. But now all the
Right.
finishes are in, all the ceilings are done. Like so now, pulling this wire that was free aired through the ceiling because it was a open ceiling before is now not an easy task.
Right.
Right now, it's multiple guys for a couple of days to go through and fix it, and that can be
Well, and it's
that's
not just
again
wire type. It's also
no.
termination because I have a story about that actually. We were doing a really fancy location with some kind of moving light, not a moving head, but like a rotating gobo or something like that.
Yep.
And it was a theatrical fixture, so it had a theatrical termination point, a 5-pin DMX connector. And architectural systems don't understand what a 5-pin XLR DMX connector is.
Yep.
And so they ran category cable to the fixture. I didn't specify what the termination was. So
Ah.
when they got to the fixture,
Yep.
they went, do I solder it to this? And so they sent me an RFI, and I was like, oh no.
Yep.
Because category cable, really, you can't do XLR termination with it. It is probably the most delicate soldering job possible to do that. So they had to rerun the cable, which was a pain because they had to rip it out. They had to rip the category
Yep.
cable out and rerun, a better RS-45 wire with a XLR termination on the end. So,
Yep.
thinking about how you're terminating your cable and your wire is just as important as the wire itself.
Oh, absolutely. Especially as a third party, right? Like if you're coming in as the technician and you're
Right.
selling the control system, right? You need to go through that lighting submittal like you wouldn't believe, like you've never done in
Hmm.
your life. Because inherently you're going to find as you go through not the original submittal, but what was then purchased by the contractors. And this is where
Right.
things can get you is you bid the
Hmm.
job based on the submittal just like they did, but you bid it for the
Hmm.
controls and everything else. Fine, great, you're going in, you're going to do all the controls, you're going to do startup. But if you then don't ask and get the submittals from the contractors as to what was actually purchased, it can
Yeah.
really burn you because you're assuming, okay, cool, I've got this fixture type which has an RJ45 connector in it. Great, I'm going to tell them to
Right.
run category cable to these, but these fixtures, these decoders don't accept category cable. I need to run a twisted pair, and I need to get that cable to these specific fixtures. Well, then you actually start digging through what was purchased and find that they changed something, or the manufacturer, because, look, the architect picked a fixture and used a cut sheet from 2 years ago. And since then, everything's changed. And now it doesn't use this category cable. It does use a twisted pair or something. So that's the type of stuff too. It's exactly this example though. If you
Right.
not only is it important for the specifier or someone to make sure you're paying attention to that, but as the startup tech or controls tech, you need to make sure that what was purchased matches what your plan was, because if you may put the contractor in the same boat. If you're responsible for the one line, because there's 5 different lighting manufacturers or something on this, and you don't catch that, and you told them to run this one specific cable type to every fixture, they're going to turn around and come back to you and say, well,
Right.
you told us to run that wire type. That's what's on your riser, right? So you have to spend the time to go through those packages and what was actually purchased, not just what was in the original drawings.
Yeah. Well, and that also brings up a really good story that I have about third-party integrators, and it's about confirming that they know what they're doing, because early on in my career, I was making like a short list of local integrators, and I had called up different distributors and said, hey, do you know how to do DMX? And they basically all said yes. And I didn't push it any further than that. So I was like, okay, these people know how to do DMX. And then one of them got picked for a project that had DMX, and it was very clear that they had never worked on a DMX project before. And, I should have done much more due diligence, because after the fact, I just had to hold their hand through the whole process and waste my fee on it. Because they said yes, but they didn't actually know what they were talking about. It's like, do you know how to breathe? Yeah. Well, do you know how to breathe underwater? Well, no, you didn't specify that specific thing. It's like, okay, fine. So like when you're talking, it's always good to interview them. Get a sense of what they're capable of doing. Ask for projects they've done before. Am I going to have port lighting, do a bridge? Absolutely. You guys do bridges day in, day out. Am I going to have you do this custom generic brand number 37 commercial project that you've never seen any information about before? No. That's such a terrible idea, because you have your skill set. You do your projects very well. I'm not going to force you into a project type that you're not applicable to. And granted, I mean, I'm sure you guys could learn very quickly. But it's more of like, do you have the experience and the skill set that I need for this specific project right now? Or is it more of like we're thinking about it maybe sometime in the future?
Classic. Yep.
But
yeah,
I mean, I guess, have you ever said yes when you didn't know?
Oh God, yes. Of course I have. Are you kidding me? Of course I've said yes. There's been multiple times that I've said yes when I shouldn't have said yes. Do we figure it out and make it work? Yes. Unfortunately, I have a bad habit of putting my guys on the spot, because someone will be like, "Can you guys do this? Can you do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah. I may have a rough idea of how I want to do it." But then I go back to the office. I go, all right, guys, so I just sold this thing, and I think we're going to do it like this, but I need someone to actually figure this out now. And I have a bad habit of still doing that. And they get mad at me sometimes when I do that. But it's it's always something. I hate to say that, but we can usually figure it out. But yes, I mean, there were times early on, especially where we're trying to get started, or I'm trying to get started more than anything.
Sure.
And you say yes to something and you may not know what you're doing. Oh, this is classic. I was freelancing. This was 22 years ago. I was freelancing, and I was at a show at the Copley Weston in Boston, and I was new to this firm, and as a freelancer, right? I was new,
Mhm.
and they were just like trying to figure out what I knew, right? And I was pretty good with DMX and fixtures and everything else. I had never patched a dimmer rack, like a production touring
Oh
rack,
no.
right? So for those of people who don't know, production touring racks, most of them have either some sort of a pin or a cable system where you've got outputs on these Socapex connectors, right? And or you've got whatever the outputs may be. And
Mhm.
inside the rack or on the top of the rack, in this case, it was a flip top VX rack. So in the rack, there are these pins, and each pin goes to a dimmer. So there are 48 pins for 40. Well, there were two because there were two per dimmer. So 96 pins
Mhm, mhm.
for 48 circuits, and then you put that pin to the associated output. Right. So I was going to take dimmer 1 to output 1 or dimmer 1 to output 32. Doesn't matter, right? You have to patch that rack. So someone had asked me to go patch the rack. I had never done this before in my life, but here I am, this eager freelancer trying to impress all these guys that I don't know, and I'm like, yeah, I can go do that for you, sure. Just tell me what you want. So they hand me the paperwork and send me back there, and I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like, where, how? And I'm like playing around with I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm like, I don't know. And then someone came back and they're like, what are you trying to do? I'm like, oh, they had to attach the rack. They're like, oh, it's a flip top. And I was like, oh, no idea what they're talking about. As I flip this thing up and I'm staring at all these pins 1 through 48. I'm staring at all these numbers. I'm like, where does all this go? I don't like what is. So I took my time and it took like 5 minutes and I'm like, all right, hang on. And I'm like trying to figure out, I'm like, all right, dimmers. Okay, dimmers. Yep, dimmer. All right. And I'm looking at the paperwork. I'm like, dimmer, output. I'm like, outputs. And I figured it out and no one knew to this day. Oh, now you all know. But to
Yeah.
this day, no one knew that this had happened. That was one of those things. I had no clue what I was doing. I had no business doing it. And it all worked out and it was fine and I figured it out and it was great and we tested everything. But that's the type of mistake where if
Yeah.
if you're doing the wrong thing, you could blow something up. You could potentially hurt somebody, right? That I had no business
Yeah.
doing that and I shouldn't have. And I joke about it now because it was forever ago,
Yeah.
but that's the type of
Right.
thing where I should have said no. I should have said I'd love to do it. I'd love to learn. Can someone help me with
Well,
this? Because
I think that
bad things can
that's a
happen.
really good thing. Yeah, I think that that's a really good point when it comes to mistakes people make is just not saying no when it's the right time to say no. Because like you said, when you're young and eager and trying to prove that you're a valuable contributor or you just want to prove that you're worth the pay that you're getting, you will say yes when you
Yeah.
really should say no. And I have a similar situation where I did a tie-in,
Yep.
and that so people who don't know what a tie-in, you're basically taking the service power that's coming into the building and tying it to the dimmer rack. So I could have died very quickly. And I
Yeah.
didn't, fortunately, but I'd never done a tie-in before. I knew nothing about what I was doing. And so, yeah, I could have certainly bit bit the bullet at that point and just I wouldn't be here today. So, like,
Yeah.
should I have said no and insisted on a professional come in to do the tie-in? Absolutely. But similar to you, this was beginning of my days, and I was like, you know what? I gotta prove that I know what I'm doing, and I gotta prove that I'm worth what they're paying me, which was
Yep.
pennies now looking back on it. So it's like, how much was my life worth? About $700. So it's like,
Yep, yep. No, but and we had this conversation with Kenny the other day, and we started
yeah,
talking at the very end. We were talking about you never trust the guy who always says yes, right? You never trust the guy with all
right.
the answers. You always trust
Yes.
the guy who's willing to say, "I don't know. Let me." Especially like from a sales perspective, if you're talking to a client, if you
Hmm.
don't know something, you have to assume the client knows. Even if they don't, you still have to assume they know, but you also don't want to give them false information, right? So
Right.
you should never, ever, ever be afraid to say, I don't know, but I know who to call, or I can look that up for
Mhm.
you and get you that answer.
Right.
Whatever it may be, you should never be afraid to say no for fear of like retribution or something like that, because
Or
it's,
to check their answer. You know,
yeah,
if you're suspicious about somebody telling you something, always like reach out to somebody else and be like, does this make sense to you?
yeah,
And that's how I've been burned. Also, is just sort of like I talked to a salesperson. I said, is this going to work? And they said, yeah, go for it. And it just blew up in my face. There was this project
yep,
where DMX project, and I was like, okay, I need to be able to do this. Is this system going to be able to do that function? And they said
yeah,
yes.
yep,
And I was very suspicious, but I was like, you know what? They know what they're doing. I'm just going to
yeah,
follow their suggestion. And yeah, we got the whole system installed, and we didn't have a third party integrator involved, which was another
yep,
mistake. But um, you know, we get to the programming point, and I'm on the phone with the manufacturer saying, "How do I do this?" And they said, "You can't."
yeah,
And it was like, okay, now I need to go to the client and tell them that they can't have the feature that we promised them.
yep,
And
yep.
at the end of the day, with that particular project, the client didn't even realize that we had requested that feature. So they were like, oh,
Okay.
okay. I mean, I wasn't even
Yep.
expecting that to begin with. And it was like,
Yep. Yep.
great. I just
Yep.
wasted everybody's time.
Yeah. Well, and I know we say DMX is complicated, and at the same time we say it's not complicated,
Right.
and it's not, right? It really is pretty simple, but it can get wonky on you. And this is where we've talked
Yes.
about before, not all devices are created equal, right? We had a job that by all rights, and we didn't sell it. We actually were brought in by the manufacturer as a third party to help figure out what was going on because we were close. And the system had been installed, it had been commissioned, everything worked. But then randomly, the lights would start flashing, just random
Mm,
pulses. And it was a DMX system. So it's like, well, this is really weird. Like, we, we went back and we looked at everything. It's like, okay, well, this controller is a name brand controller that people use every day. This is not the issue. There's three of them. It's
right.
not all three systems in the same building are doing the same thing. We're like, I could blame one
Hmm,
controller, I can't blame three. Follow that
right.
to the opto splitter. They're all using the same manufacturer's opto splitter, one that I use every day. I'm like, nope, this is not the issue. Like, this is fine. We go out to the fixtures. We're looking at the terminations. Everything's fine. I'm like, okay, let's break it. Like, something's off. There's obviously an issue. We pulled the DMX off, used a local tester directly to the fixture line. Fixture line's fine. The opto splitter out to the fixtures. Everything's fine. Go back to the controller. Look at the DMX from the controller. It looks okay. It was we started getting into looking at the actual transmission speeds and the baud rates and
Mm,
started really
mm,
looking at the
mm,
DMX. And we're like, okay, something weird is going on here. And the DMX looked okay coming out. It was coming out at a really fast speed, but that shouldn't be a problem.
sure.
But look, certain drivers don't like really
Mm,
fast DMX speeds. You have to bring it down.
right.
This controller did not have the ability to change the speed, and that's not
Oh,
uncommon,
no.
right?
No, it's not.
Opto
But
splitter can't change the speed. We ended up
right.
having to use DMX decelerators from Fleener.
Oh,
That was
no.
the solution. We added DMX decelerators into the system, and we found the right speed for the decelerator at which the fixtures would no longer flash. And I figured
Well,
out that speed with my DMX Cat. So for anyone who doesn't
mm,
know, a
mm.
DMX Cat's a test utility made by City Theatrical. They're phenomenal. Everyone should have one that deals with DMX. Um, they should sponsor this now.
Yeah, for sure.
But right, but so like they're a fantastic tool. You're able to change the speeds. You can change everything. The stop bits, the speed at which it's going out. You can change everything locally in the controller. And I was able to create I was able to mimic the same speed coming out of the controller and verify that it did not work from a third-party controller at the same transmission rate. I was able to then slow it down to a rate that I knew I could achieve through the DMX decelerator and prove that it was stable and the system worked. We added those devices in. Everything was great. It cost the manufacturer, it cost them a lot, right? And because they had spent months trying to figure this out. And it was a mess because you had the controls company doing this and them doing this, and it was just everyone's pointing fingers at each other, and it got really tough. And that's when they called us and said, we need someone who can just understands the whole system, who can just go in and figure out what the heck is going on, because by all rights it should work. It's a DMX system, and they were right. It is. Not all components are created equal, and they're not always compatible.
And that's the thing about checking compatibility. I mean, even though we have standards, that doesn't mean that just because it's DMX and DMX, that they're going to just right out of the box work perfectly fine. Knowing your systems really well helps you avoid those kinds of issues. And, we've got a ton of different manufacturers in North America that offer different products and different features and stuff like that. But that's where the research of being a really good controls designer comes in. You got to figure out, okay, how am I going to learn these things? How am I going to stay on top of, what I'm providing? And fortunately, things have kind of started to plateau, in my opinion, when it comes to features and technologies. We're kind of hitting a bit of a ceiling right now. Whether that changes, who knows? But, as far as double checking, just looking at the cut sheet, looking at the information and going, okay, do they say something specific? I think the other thing that you mentioned is, longevity. Some of the mistakes that I've made have been a result of me trusting that a brand new company knows what they're doing. And lo and behold, they clearly didn't check their homework and make sure that they were doing what they needed to do to make something happen. And in most cases, that's when you're dealing third party, usually when you're trying to integrate something into a new system. But that's not always the case. I mean, it could still be within the system itself and the proprietary nature of it. So, I think the other thing there is this idea of whose responsibility it is as well. And to try to say, oh no, it's not my responsibility. At the end of the day, as a specifier or even as an integrator, you're the one who's going to get the finger pointed at. And so it's not a question of was it your responsibility? It's are you going to fix the problem now that it's there?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's so true, right? And it at the end of the day, as soon as you're on a project, there is a level of responsibility that has now been applied to you, regardless of your role in that job. If you found the problem and didn't say anything, well, you're just as guilty for not helping it get fixed, right?
Exactly.
So there's no win-win there. There's only a lose-lose for people, right? So everyone, once you touch it, you're in it, whether you want to be or not. You're in it. And I know we're running low on time, but like we didn't even touch on wireless, and
for sure,
the amount of issues.
No, but I mean,
I will say the amount of problems I've had with wireless in the past, every single one of them, could have been solved by a site survey. Every single issue could have been solved with a site survey with the equipment, right? Everyone operates at maybe a different frequency or a different band within a certain spectrum. Always, always, always test your gear. We've had too many issues in old buildings here in New England, plaster lath, horsehair, that take your pick. The wire mesh is the worst. It's a killer. You lose signal between walls, and you now have to, how do I get a device over here? How do I get an antenna into this room to fix this problem? And I cannot, that's probably the biggest thing with wireless is do yourself a favor and do a site survey. Doesn't matter what the manufacturer says. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. go do a site survey, take the equipment, and
Yeah.
actually verify signal strength and everything else. Because man, that can just turn into such a nightmare for everybody when
For
you run
sure.
into issues like that.
No, and I think that's, not just the site survey for that physical parameter, but also to meet with the IT group. There was a
Yes.
project that I specified wireless on, and we were so far down. We were like issuing 100% CDs the next day, and the IT group got wind that we were using wireless, and they pulled us into a meeting and said, "You cannot use wireless here. We're not allowing you to do that." And I had to redo all of my work. And had I had that quick conversation at the beginning of the project, does your
Yep.
IT group have an issue with wireless? I would not have had to redo all of that work and make
Right.
the wireless system a wired system.
Man, that
But
must have been a ton of
oh,
fun to go through.
it was painful. But from that, I learned, always talk to the IT group. Always
Yep.
double check with them. Are you okay with
Yep.
wireless being used here? And if they're not okay, well, okay, then you don't have a choice because they're going to
Yep.
control that. So,
Yep.
but
Yep.
yeah, so we're almost out of time here, and I think some of the takeaways from this, first of all, don't try to lie your way out. Don't try to
Yep.
pretend that the mistake never happened.
Yep.
Just come clean and be, you know, genuine and professional about it. Don't try to be like, yeah, I screwed up, blah, 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 blah. Like, just be like, yeah, I screwed up. I'm owning up to it. How do we go forward?
Yep.
And most people will be receptive to that. They'll be like, yeah, okay, that sucks.
Yep.
You really dropped the ball, but okay, let's move forward. Because at the end of the
Yep.
day, that's just the reality. People just want to be done with the project. So
Yep.
how do you make that happen as quickly as possible? The other thing is reach out to people.
Yep.
You know, talk to them, have them double check your work. There's nothing wrong with that. The pros at the top have other people look at their work just to make sure, to do that quick flip through the pages even, because they might spot something that you're just so deep into the project that you're not
Yep.
even realizing from a higher level. It's like, oh, right, I needed that.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and additionally, to double check your work is not just to go, yeah, somebody said that. It's okay, somebody said that, but is there something to support what they said? Is there documentation out there? Is there precedence? Has this been done before? Um,
Yep.
and then finally, just thinking through the parameters of the project itself. Don't treat it just like you've got paper in front of you. It's a real location. How far away is it? How challenging is it going to be on site? What kinds of procedures are going to be involved? Where are you in the chopping block when it or the time frame? Are you at the
Yep.
very beginning and everybody's going to have to wait for you, or are you going to be at the end and nobody's going to care about your screw up and it's your problem to deal with? Uh,
Yep.
and so all of that, just thinking through, getting a sense of the project as a personal project. The copy paste mentality is not just a death knell because of laziness and the results of using the same part number that you've used for 20 years, but also because
Yep.
you're no longer treating the project as a unique experience, something that will
Yep.
have unforeseen results, unexpected things. And so if it's an existing building and you don't walk it, you're gonna find something out, and
Yeah.
it's not gonna be in a fun way. Whereas if you just took a day to go out to the place, walk the place with the owner, and be like, okay, what about this? What about that? You're gonna avoid so much heartburn later on. And
Yep.
so just
Yep.
taking the time, and I think to your point, yeah, New England, we love to rush things. We try to get done as quickly as we can, and that in some ways is great because projects get done really quickly, and in other ways it's terrible because
Mm.
mistakes happen. so fast and so hard that,
Yep.
we see so many unfortunate results of those quick decisions. And so, like, sometimes that's why we end up with bloat on our
Yep.
documentation, because we have CYA notes that just run on, run on, run on, run on. Nobody reads it anymore because it's just so big. And as a result, they don't read the one important note I needed them to read in that list of CYA notes. And so, nowadays I sometimes just create a big graphic that goes up in the upper
Yep.
left-hand corner of my sheets that says, you need to read this through because it's not a standard lighting control project. And even then, it doesn't catch people's attention. So,
Yep.
sometimes they'll just blowing through it, and they don't even pay attention to the notes, even with, arrows pointing to it and saying, look at me.
Yep.
So, but, you know, in those cases, what I'll do if I'm afraid of a project could go potentially wrong, I will pre-plan everything I can. And that is, I guess, the last thing that I will share as a piece of advice is, do not be afraid to share information, especially with your salespeople, the integrators, the design team. You're not hiding IP. You're not protecting an
Right.
intellectual property. You're trying to make sure the project goes smoothly. And so by sharing that information, you're actually helping that project achieve good results, because there are times where I've worked with, like, alongside a group that's doing my job just for a different part of the project, and they will be cagey about that information. And as a result, I can't do my job because I
Yep.
need to work with them. So being cagey just makes you look at like a jerk. It doesn't actually make you seem like a team player. It does not help the project at the end of the day.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, look, there are multiple companies that where none of us are individuals here, right? Or we don't
Right.
own everything, right? We are
Right.
all individuals, individual companies, but we all have to work together for sort of the greater good of what we're doing here. And because controls just continue to change and evolve, and like you said, you can't be afraid to ask for help. And every one of us has a colleague or a mentor that you can reach out to if you have a question or have a concern. I have, I mean, I've got plenty of people within my own organization, and I've got other people I
Right.
can reach out to. I even have people at competitors that I can reach out to when I have a specific concern, and they do the same, vice versa. And we have great
Mhm.
relationships because if there's projects, especially a project that's not being bid on, and they have a
Yeah.
question, we have that trust that, okay, you're going to bring this to me, I'm going to help you with this. I'm not going to then go turn around and steal your project, right? You've been working on this, you're working on this with your client. I don't even know this person. I'm not about to go try and poach this away from you, right? And
Right.
we
Right.
have those relationships and that trust that we can work through these things, because that's just it. We've all had different experiences. So if you know someone who's had a similar experience, you shouldn't be afraid to reach out to them and ask for that
Yeah.
help. But you, as an individual, need to put yourself in that position where you can ask for help, and people are going to want to help you and want to trust you. And if you're just closed off all the time and afraid to do that, and come across like, the know-it-all, who people aren't going to want to work with you. And that says a lot, right? So you need to be humble and understand that if you want to really do this for a long time, and be involved in the industry, you need to have those collaborative friendships in order to make things happen, because the amazing work gets done when we work together, because we all have different
Absolutely.
skill sets and traits. So
Yes.
awesome. All right, I think we've taken up enough of everybody's time. I will close us out and remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Academy.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes and a whole lot more. But huge shout out to our sponsor for this episode. We could not do this without their support. or our projects without their support, for that
That's right.
matter. MaxLight and their CMax lighting controls platform, I have spoken to them on several occasions about projects. They have helped me out. They are an excellent resource. They have great technology. I highly recommend you check them out. maxlite.com/CMAX. But thank you for joining us. And Ron, thank you as always. This was an awesome conversation.
Absolutely, Webster. Fantastic.